Okay, so thank you, Philip. I'm incredibly excited to welcome you to my podcast. I consider this actually to be some sort of scoop. I know that you've had a very busy summer, and perhaps the weather hasn't been ideal for touring in the way that you have been. Has it been okay?
Yeah, it's been great, Alex. It's been wonderful to be out, to meet people, to share the great news about beautiful, life-affirming, compassionate solutions to the problems that we face as humanity.
Yes.
How to address the climate, nature, and health emergencies that we're now facing.
Yes, I saw that you're at the Hay Festival in May. It reminded me a few years back. I went to the Hay Festival and we were kind of rained out. We were staying in a wigwam and the water was pouring through the hole at the top and kept putting the fire out. So I hope you had better weather and better accommodation than we had.
Well, it was just a day trip for me to Hay, but it's the fourth time I've been there in recent years, and it's always a pleasure.
Good. So Philip, as the CEO for the charity Compassion in World Farming, which advocates for the ending of factory farming, could you begin by telling us why the work you do is so important? I mean, why should we end factory farming?
Factory farming is the biggest cause of animal cruelty on the planet. It is also a major driver of declines in wildlife across the world. It is integral to the climate emergency that we're now facing. The livestock industry, which is predominated by factory farming, creates more greenhouse gases than all of the world's direct emissions from planes, trains, and cars put together. So it is huge. Factory farming is also a contributor to pandemics. Remember swine flu that killed so many people around the world, and squandering antibiotics. Nearly 3/4 of the world's antibiotics are fed to farmed animals, mainly to prop them up, just to keep them alive and growing in these factory farmed conditions. And that is why we could be, if we carry on as we are, we could be facing a post-antibiotic era where currently treatable diseases will once again kill.
Mm. I mean, you didn't mention there the actual cruelty to the animals themselves. Is this? I suppose that approach doesn't always have the desired effect for lots of people.
Well, it is the biggest cause of animal cruelty on the planet, and this is a direct effect of the fact that factory farming involves the confinement of animals in cages, in big barns, in warehouses, in feedlots, and then feeding them grain. So unnatural diets in unnatural conditions where they can't express their natural behaviors, where they often can't even turn around for weeks, months, and sometimes their entire lives. This is abject cruelty. This is animals being kept in conditions of utter deprivation for their entire lives. And it not only makes them miserable, it also makes them unhealthy. And that is why they present such a pandemic risk to us as people.
Mm. I've heard you refer to yourself as a passionate pragmatist. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, can you tell me or us what you mean by that?
Yeah, passionate pragmatism is about a broad church approach to change, seeing the need for all people from all across the world to be part of the movement for change. It's about not letting perfection get in the way of progress. It's about saying, look, wouldn't it be great if there were no farmed animals in the system? if we got rid of farming animals altogether. But the fact is, there are more farmed animals in the world now than ever before. The numbers continue to go up, even though there is a rise in veganism and vegetarianism. The fact is that there are more people eating more meat than ever before. So passionate pragmatism is about taking the world where it is, not where I want it to be, ideally, and trying to make a difference here and now.
Mm. So is it about trying to bring together all the different groups, the vegans, the vegetarians, and the meat eaters into one kind of unified place to work together almost?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about going beyond tribalism, Alex,
Yeah.
because the fact is, I see it time and time again, not everyone, but as a generalization, regenerative farmers. So these are farmers that are keeping their animals in good, healthy, animal welfare friendly ways. They hate vegans, and vegans hate regenerative farmers. And both of those groups hate the technologists that are producing cultivated meat, lab-grown meat from stem cells, and so on. And who benefits from this division? Well, the status quo, the factory farmed interests, those that want to take animals out of the fields and put them in confinement and feed them grain that should be feeding people. So let's come together, all of us that see the need for an urgent rethink of our food. Let's come together. Let's be part of the same movement. Let's bring unity rather than division, strength rather than discord, and change as a result of being one.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, the vegans that I've spoken to, they are in favor of cultured meat. Vegetarians are in favor of cultured meat, and flexitarians that I've spoken to are all in favor of cultured meat. The people who seem to be against it, that kind of notice the yuck factor in cultured meat, are the meat eaters, the ones who are expected to eat this, what they probably think of as some kind of dog food or spam style food. So I mean, are you a supporter of cultivated meat? I know we should call it cultivated meat now, not cultured meat. I've been told that. Are you in favor of cultivated meat?
I absolutely am, Alex. I'm a big champion of cultivated meat as one of a portfolio of beautiful, life-affirming, compassionate solutions that can change the way that we produce and consume food. And to be honest, we are running out of time and it can't come quick enough. At the moment, food is the biggest driver of climate change. It's the biggest single sector emitting greenhouse gases. It is also the biggest land user on the planet. Nearly half the habitable land surface of the planet is producing food, and of that, most of it is devoted to livestock products. And so that is why we need to do things differently. We need to move away from keeping animals in factory farms, keeping animals in ways which causes not only cruelty to them, but also huge wastage in the food system, using vast tracts of land and emitting so much greenhouse gases. And the simple way, the single solution as part of a portfolio that can help us do that is cultivated meat, producing meat in a bioreactor from stem cells that have been taken from a harmless biopsy from a donor animal.
Mm. What do you think is going to be one of, or what do you think are going to be the main problems with persuading people to eat cultivated meat? I mean, clearly there are problems bringing cultivated meat to scale, so that the cost is down and the production is kind of worthwhile. But do you think there's going to be a problem persuading people to eat it?
I don't think so, no. There hasn't been a problem persuading people to eat meat from animals that have been kept for their whole lives in abject cruelty, that have been standing in their own filth, that are in barns filled with ammonia, that have been fed copious antibiotics simply to keep them alive. And then they're dragged off to the slaughterhouse and they're producing meat which is of poor quality, high in saturated fat, low in protein and other health-giving nutrients. People don't have a problem eating that stuff. And the reason for that is because cheap meat from factory farms is cheap and anonymous. It's sold in a freezer very often. It doesn't declare on the label where it's come from, how it's been produced. So people buy it on price and they buy it because of the anonymity. Now, as soon as cultivated meat overcomes the short-term problems of needing to scale up, which is a technical solution, and needing to reduce the price, which will happen with scale, as soon as it overcomes those short-term problems, then cultivated meat will benefit from cheap anonymity that has seen the rise of factory farming. And as soon as cultivated meat becomes cheaper, because it will be healthier, and because it will have great benefits for the planet as well as the consumer, it will be the go-to. It will be the thing that people that have previously bought cheap anonymous meat will buy instead. Cultivated meat has the potential to cut the legs off the existing intensive livestock industry and make it redundant, a remnant of history.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast that you did with the plant-based meat agency. I can't remember the exact name, but you were describing how animals are not allowed out of the barn, how they're always sort of kept inside, and huge tracts of land are being used to create the feed, and so the feed is sort of poured into the barn and then the meat comes out the other side. So it's kind of much the same as a bioreactor in lots of ways, except a bioreactor is 3 times more efficient. From a cow, it's apparently around 4% efficient, and bioreactor is something between 10 and 15, perhaps going up to 20%. So that had a real kind of visual image for me. But I guess the problem is, I mean, I've read some of George Monbiot's stuff before, and he believes that people's behavior can change. And I mean, personally, I'm not sure how easy it is to change people's behavior. What do you think about that, about behavior change?
Well, I think that behavior change does happen and can happen quickly. And I think that the beautiful thing about cultivated meat is that it's pushing at an open door. It is real meat, but without the animal cruelty. It's real meat, but without the greenhouse gas emissions to the same extent. It's real meat, but without the huge land requirement. And the more people are eating more meat than ever before. That is the statistical reality of our times. Cultivated meat offers the promise of being the renewable energy equivalent of food. Just as with renewable energy, the energy comes out of the same plug socket. You just plug your device in and you get the same level of convenience. Well, cultivated meat will give that same experience, that same convenience, perhaps at a cheaper price to consumers that are currently eating meat, but without the downsides. It would reduce the amount of land needed by 98%. It will reduce the amount of greenhouse gases by about 80% or more. These are huge. It will cut out entirely the cruelty. These are promises that are too tantalizing to let go.
Yeah, absolutely. In your latest book, 60 Harvests Left, you talk about the degradation of soil and sort of various other things. You say that we, because of the degradation of soil, that we only have 60 harvests left. you foresee the future in quite an apocalyptic way, perhaps. Can you tell us a little bit about your book, and is it really that bad?
Well, Alex, sadly, it is. The book is arranged around the 4 seasons, the last being spring, which is a hopeful symphony of how we can bring these beautiful, life-affirming, compassionate solutions to the fore and save the day. And it's within the gift of all of us to help bring that about. But going back to the beginning, the book is framed around the 4 seasons, and where we are currently as a society is in the summertime, a time of perpetual partying and consuming as if the world has no boundaries. But we're starting to see the browning leaves of autumn come into play with the growing anxiety around climate change and the collapse of nature and what have you. Winter, if we carry on as we are, then we could face as a society a perpetual winter. We all got a collective taste of that perpetual winter through COVID-19. But we don't have to go there. As I say, there is this beautiful, harmonious symphony of solutions, of which cultivated meat is one of them. Regenerative farming is another, bringing animals out of factory farms onto the land where they can help regenerate soil health and create much better, healthier food in ways which brings back biodiversity. So cultivated meat, reducing the number of animals that we need in the system, regenerative farming, where the animals that are in the system live much better lives. This is a way where we can essentially have it all. We can have our meat and eat it, if you like, using the cake analogy.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things I was thinking about. Well, when I had that visual image in my mind earlier, which I mentioned about the barns filled with the animals or the barns filled with the bioreactors, is that clearly farmers are going to need to be producing an enormous amount of feed to go into the bioreactors, at least kind of 10 times the food that they produce. And in one of your podcasts, you were talking about kind of soil erosion. Well, in your book, you talk about kind of soil erosion because of the massive farming. So kind of cultivated meat, in a way, I mean, there could be a kind of unexpected kind of consequence of cultured meat, whereby we actually, people eat more meat because it's more easily available, it's cheaper, and the farming becomes more intense in order to feed the bioreactors. I'm not sure if this is something you've considered, or if this is, I mean, it's quite a long way off, of course, but it's a possibility, isn't it?
Well, actually, I think the reverse is true. The fact is that we currently feed 40% of the entire world's crop harvest to factory farmed animals. That's what's going on at the moment. And the problem is that living, breathing animals are pretty damned lousy at converting crops into meat, milk, and eggs. They waste most of the food value in terms of calories and protein in that conversion. In this way, Alex, in this way, we waste enough food every year to feed 4 billion people on the planet. That's half of humanity alive today. Now, far less feedstuff is needed to feed bioreactors, because it is so much more efficient at converting in the nutrient soup into protein and other nutrients. So actually, it's going to be a lifesaver moving to cultivated meat, moving away from the traditional, if you like, intensive livestock industry.
Absolutely. I really liked what you said about in order to encourage people to change, we need to tell the stories, you said, and to give people the information they need, rather than preaching to them and rather than kind of telling them what to do, because people don't like being told what to do. The problem there, perhaps, is that there are many outlets and millions of dollars of backing on the other side of the argument, kind of telling stories to encourage people to carry on as usual and to ignore the science entirely. This happened with big tobacco and with big oil. And you mentioned the figure of 700 billion given in subsidies to animal agriculture. So with that amount stood to be lost by the animal farming industry, it seems likely that change is going to face robust opposition, to say the least. Have you seen any signs of that yourself? Opposition, perhaps, to your book or to your work?
Oh, absolutely. Opposition is a fact of life when you're trying to create the kind of change that we're talking about. Opposition is a fact of life when you're dealing with $1 trillion problem. That's how big the meat industry is. And it's not farmers that are to blame, individual farmers. Let me be really clear. What is driving this industrial approach to factory farming are a handful of companies that produce the cages and the grain feed, the drugs, and the chemical pesticides and artificial fertilizers that fuel the whole system. Really big agri businesses. They're the ones that are putting up the opposition, and they're the ones that we as a movement need to face down and overcome. What we do need to do is enlist corporates such as supermarkets and restaurant chains to our cause, and we're doing that. Compassion in World Farming is doing that every day. We also need to enlist governments. The European Union has put forward a new deal, a new Green Deal set of proposals to move away from industrial agriculture. Now, that is, of course, coming up against huge opposition, but we need to get behind it. We need to hold them firm to their pledge to end the use of all cages in animals farmed for food. These are big pledges that are coming from governments. So working with supportive governments, working with supportive companies, encouraging the United Nations to get involved. Last week I was in Rome at the UN Food Systems Summit, which is something that I've been a champion for over the recent years, an ambassadorial champion. This is the way which we as individual people can get behind as part of a movement, but we can all help absolutely every day too, through our own food choices. We can seize the power of our plate 3 times a day by eating more plants, less and better meat, making sure that any meat that we do have today comes from regenerative, organic, free-range, pasture-fed sources. And in the not too distant future, buying cultivated meat that comes from stem cells rather than live animals.
Mm. So, I mean, when we look at big tobacco and big oil, they in their fight back against renewables and against against kind of banning tobacco, I suppose, or kind of making it harder for people to choose to smoke. They for a couple of decades they had control over the narrative. It seems. So is there something we can learn from that? Because it's bound to happen, isn't it, in the same way with food, because it is such a high earning industry.
Absolutely. It happens right here, right now. The narrative is that we have a growing human population, therefore we need factory farming of animals to feed that populace. Well, actually the opposite is true. Factory farms waste food, they don't make it. They waste enough food every year to feed half of humanity alive today. It's shocking, yet that is the narrative that is out there, and we need to turn it around.
And how do we do that? I mean, that's just about kind of everyone speaking up, I suppose, isn't it? Everyone who has a voice to use their voice. Would it be?
Yeah, exactly. It's about speaking up. It's about getting involved in campaigns by organizations like Compassion in World Farming, CIWF.org. It's about also seizing the power of our plate, as I say, eating more plants, less and better meat and dairy. If you're eating animal sourced foods, make sure it does come from better, more compassionate, regenerative sources like pasture fed, free range, or organic.
Yeah, because it seems that perhaps until cultured meat is available on the market to regular people, they don't really have an alternative to their burger. I mean, I've always thought in order to get someone to stop eating a burger, you have to kind of hand them an identical burger. So until that's possible, it's going to be difficult to persuade people to change their habits, isn't it? So it's a bit of a waiting game, slightly, isn't it?
Well, there are very good, authentic plant-based burgers available now by companies like Beyond Meat or Moving Mountains or Impossible Foods. And these are getting better and better at being meat-like every day. But you're right, the game changer, in my view, is going to be cultivated meat from stem cells, because it will be real meat, but without the downsides and what could be better. And the great news is it's already been given the commercial go-ahead, certainly for cultivated chicken in Singapore in 2020, and only about a month ago given the go-ahead in the US. Now, what happens in the US pretty much comes to the UK quite quickly. So watch this space.
Yes, they've put. I think Aleph Farms have put in their uh, uh, order for approval in Switzerland. So that's the first in in Europe. So it is exciting. And have you tried any cultivated meat yourself?
As yet, Alex, no, I haven't. I was invited to go and taste some in the US, but was scuppered because of COVID. But I am hoping to get a taste of cultivated meat for real in the autumn in South Africa.
Would you try it though? Because you are vegan, aren't you? So would you try cultivated meat?
I would. I absolutely would. And the reason for that is curiosity, and and it will give me a better ability to advocate for it, because I think there's no better way of taking animals out of the system than being able to advocate for alternative proteins that people are going to want to eat.
Absolutely. And because you are a passionate pragmatist, that's exactly what you should be doing, probably. So, I mean,
Exactly.
it's been great talking to you. I just one last question. So, I mean, sort of finally, as your idea of an end goal, what does the finish line look like for the future of farmed animals and food production? What would be the ideal end scenario?
The ideal end would be no more factory farming whatsoever. Every animal being given compassion and respect, being able to live a healthy and happy life as part of the countryside, and with far fewer farmed animals, and with much more space for a resurgence of life-giving wildlife.
Mm. And I did hear you say that by 2100, you expected people to not be eating meat in the same way again. What does that mean? That just means that people aren't farming meat anymore.
Yeah, I absolutely believe, and in fact, George Monbiot and I put forward a motion at the Oxford Union debate in 2018 that by 2100, meat eating as we know it will be a thing of the past. And I absolutely believe that that is going to be the case, because I think meat that we do eat by 2100 largely will come from cultivated meat, from bioreactors.
Mm. Well, I hope so. It's been wonderful talking to you, Philip, and thank you very much for your time. I've ordered your book; it just hasn't arrived yet, so I look forward to reading that. Okay, I'm going to